always forget paper.
All right, gang, we're ready to go for today. I'm excited about what we're moving into in this class. It takes a long time to set up everything in a way where you kind of get to the real meat of the class. We're starting to get on the verge of that today. This picture, hashtag no filter, it's cool. This was taken about a year ago, and it won some awards in National Geographic. It's taken about right at the edge of where the troposphere meets the stratosphere. But it's beautiful, right? Yeah. The beauty of our planet and the uniqueness of our planet is contingent on one very specific phenomena. There are other supporting phenomena that are connected to it and help support it, but there's one very specific thing that makes life on this planet possible. The beautiful thing is not the landscape of Earth. Everyone who studies planets, scientists who look at planets, most planets have a lot of the same kinds of things. They have complex atmospheres, many of them. They have geologic processes. But there's one thing that makes Earth different, and what is the thing?
Water.
There are other planets and places with water as well. It's the life. The fact that there is life on this planet. That is the unique thing. I brought a treat for the class, something to share, something that you ignore a lot probably, but I wanted to bring it and just kind of like show you so we don't miss it, because it's really important. And luckily it doesn't take up much space. It's in my left pocket. I brought the phenomena, the most important phenomena of anything on planet Earth. What is it? What is it?
Bug.
Not a bug.
It's
a leaf. This is kind of a cheap thing, but I don't want to miss it. Today we're going to really dig. I'm going to push you in a second. But this phenomenon, I don't mean it to be gimmicky and corny and that sort of thing, but this is what makes life on this planet unique. It's all around us. We miss it a lot. We tend to not think about it very much because it doesn't have a behavior. But the complexity of what's happening inside of this is what makes life on this planet even a thing at all. What is unique about the leaf? Why is this the phenomenon? What do you think? Of all the things I could grab, and again, there's many supporting phenomena, why is this the thing? Why does this matter at all? Any ideas? Yeah?
I think because without plants, there wouldn't be anything for other forms of life to, like it spaces the food chain, and it harnesses the power of the sun and of water to create effectively nothing.
Good. That's not a trick question. It all starts here with this other image. The sun is extremely powerful, right? We've already explored this. 93 million miles away. Extraordinary amount of nuclear fission and energy coming out of that. But the energy alone is not enough to support life on this planet. We need this complex interaction to tie together the two things. So we're going to pause here for a second because I want to talk about the course narrative. The design of this class, I know I talked about it at the beginning of the year, but we're going to be able to talk about this and speak and share about this in very intelligent ways by the time we get through the class. That's going to be my measure of success, not what you guys get on the AP class. I don't care about the test. But I want you to be able to understand the complexity, the beauty of Earth as a system. So this is the first chapter, and it's kind of like the preamble to all the stuff that matters and makes the planet unique. So Earth is everything on Earth is highly interconnected with numerous natural systems that vary across space and time. So we talked about it. What is it? What are the systems? Give some of them to me. If I say there are numerous natural systems, your brain needs to make the association to certain things. What are they? It's not a mystery. They're the things we've studied so far. What is one of the systems? What can we talk about?
Convection cycle.
Okay, convection cycle. Excellent.
Carbon cycle.
Hold on. Let's stay on convection cycle for a second. Why does the convection cycle matter at all? Yeah. So we have climate, and we have dry and wet. Okay, let's go in deeper. Why does climate and temperature, why does that matter at all?
Because if it's too hot or too cold, we can't support it.
Okay, so we know that we need some stability. Okay, great. And temperature. Everybody heard that. What else? What else is key? Let's talk about the precipitation thing, and we'll loop back to the other thing. Why does the amount of water matter? Yeah.
The plants need water for photosynthesis.
So plants need water as an input for photosynthesis. Okay, good. And how does it vary across space and time? So if those are the things that are important, but we know it varies, how does it vary? If I pick two places on the planet, are they exactly the same, or are there meaningful differences? There are definitely meaningful differences. So what are they?
Things we've been talking about, like soil composition.
I know I'm turning the screws hard, but I'm gonna do it. I'm comfortable doing it.
There's different precipitation in different areas because of.
So where do we find different precipitations? In what areas? How are they different?
At
That's
zero latitude, there's a lot of precipitation.
So at the equator there's a lot. Where
At
else
30,
is there?
30, there's little.
Not much at 30.
I think at 60 it's also quite a bit.
There's a lot, quite a bit at 60. What else?
Not much at 90.
Not much at 90. So as we go out from the equator, we go from really wet conditions to drier as we approach 30, and then it's dry, and then as we move from 30 to 60, we go from dry to wet, and then we go from wet to dry again by the poles. So it varies across space. How does it vary across time? It's the same all the time? Great, now I got that basic latitude, I've hacked the whole thing. Call it a day? Yeah.
Depends on a lot on the lithosphere as well, because if there's mountains, that blocks.
Okay, great. So lithosphere causes some disruptions. The topography of the Earth, fabulous. There's more. How does it vary across time? So that's another great one about varying across space. But just call it a day, same all the time. Now I got it.
Seasons.
Seasons. And what drives the seasons?
Position.
Earth around the sun, the orbit, right? And what's the key thing? Why does that matter? If we're here versus another place, what's the piece that we really care about?
The amount of sunlight we're exposed to.
The amount of sun and what dictates the sun? It's the angle, right? And so the nice thing about this is it has a pattern. It's somewhat predictable because of the year-round thing, but it definitely varies over space. It, of course, varies over time. That is one of the cycles. What are some of the other key things? The natural systems that vary. What are the other ones that we've talked about? I know this is hard. It should be hard, yeah.
Soil composition.
Okay, so we have soil. Soil is a natural system. How does that come to be? What are the drivers? So we have weathering and erosion. So we have this link to the formation of soil to climate and weather. What else matters for soil formation? Topography matters, age, temperature. There's another really big one. Humans for sure, but I'm going to ignore that one for now, not because it's not right, just because we're thinking about natural systems.
Chemical weathering.
Chemical weathering. So if I put this place, if I go right here and we'll say, well, let's do 40 degrees and 40 degrees latitude and 100 degrees longitude, puts us about right here. Pretty cool. Lots of soil right here. Why no soil here? It's ocean. Why is this the ocean, not land? What is the natural system that dictates where do we find things on the planet? Yeah. So plate tectonics. So this geologic history varies across space and time, or no? Great, I got this. So now I can memorize this and move on with my life. No. How does it vary? It varies in size of land space. How does it vary across time? They're constantly moving because the planet, the plate tectonics are dynamic. These are the key associations. If you can't understand any of that, it's going to make everything we're about to do harder. You can, of course, memorize all the terms, but I want to understand it. This is chapter 2. This is where we're going. Oh, sorry, I didn't put that up there. We already worked through that. This is chapter 2. Living organisms require both energy and resources. So think matter. So we need energy, and then we need matter. And therefore, conversions in those two things underlie all ecological processes. So if this in number 1 drives this in number 2, if we want to understand number 2 really well, we have to understand all the natural systems and how they're driving things. Everything you've mentioned influences the phenomena aforementioned. Living things, which is this phenomenon right here. Photosynthesis, there is nothing more important in the history of our planet than this right here. Here's a new word that I want to throw out here because we've been talking a lot about sphere, so just a little textbook definition. We've talked a lot about the atmosphere, the geosphere, one that I neglected to mention a little bit, the pedosphere, which is soil. So we have the geosphere, which is all the layers, the lithosphere and all of that of the Earth. Those are the layers, the Earth science. But the pedosphere is the soil. And then the atmosphere, of course, where climate and weather occur. Obviously important. Here's the next one, biosphere. So it's the same root word, the Greek word for living, like we talked about with abiotic and biotic. So it's any living thing. So that tree out there and Kyle, both biosphere. Kyle's computer, no. Tree, yes. Grass, yes. Bird, yes. Santi's shoe, no. It's on his body, it's not a part of it. Got it? Biosphere. Excellent. Here's what we're going to get into today. It's a fabulous picture. I love this picture. Check it out. Gator eating big fish, eating smaller fish, all in the same shot. It's a photo of a lifetime right there. The learning objectives for today, there's a couple. We're going to really talk about ecosystem boundaries and try to understand a really simplified version of this, but think about how it applies to the movement of matter energy around our planet. That's what drives all ecological processes. So let's get started here. Here we go, just basic review. Earth is open system in terms of energy or closed? Open, because the energy comes from the outside area. It comes from the sun, and then it flows through. A lot of it stays here. A lot of transformations happen, and it moves on. What about matter? Closed. Closed, for sure. There's not an exchange of matter on this planet. The form of energy that reaches the Earth. Radiation. So we're going to move back a little bit, because we've looked at radiation as it toggles this thing that controls climate and weather. It's the energy, conduction, convection, of course, but we're going to focus on this piece around radiation for today. This is the level of understanding for this class that I need you to know, but I also want to make sure that we respect some of the underlying complicated and more nuanced pieces of this, but we're going to look at this in a very specific way. So the phenomena from 10,000 foot view is the sun has a lot of energy. The energy excites electrons inside of things like plant leaves. The plants utilize those excited electrons to facilitate chemical reactions. And for chemical reactions to occur, we need two things. We already have the energy. The other is we need the reactants or the ingredients or the inputs. The inputs are this. The basic ones are carbon dioxide, which comes from the atmosphere, and water, which can come from all parts of the hydrosphere. In this context, usually we're thinking about it, it's in the soil and available for plants, and the plants take it in. Then, the chemical reaction that takes place through a complex series of channels, we make glucose, and then as a byproduct, we also produce oxygen. The next thing, the sugar is taken in by organisms, they break it apart. As a byproduct, they produce carbon dioxide. They also produce water. So I want to pause here and look at a couple key things. So as part of this process, we just talked about water resources and the availability of water and the hydrosphere. And we looked at precipitation, condensation, infiltration, evaporation. But when organisms move water from inside the biosphere out into the atmosphere, we call that process transpiration. So this comes up as a movement of water as well. So organisms, like complex animals, we excrete the waste, but plants also allow for some of this water. So embedded in this cycle of carbon, we also see a movement of oxygen, and we also see movement of water. So there's connections to the oxygen cycle, and there are connections to the hydrogen cycle as well. Feel good about that? So carbon is a very unique molecule. It's the fourth most abundant molecule on our planet, and we call it the organic molecule because it has some unique properties to make interesting covalent bonds, and it has a really nice electroaffinity that allows it to build a lot of complex molecules. If those things aren't true, then life doesn't exist. We need these molecules, and so we see that carbon is really important, but availability of carbon dioxide as the form, and then availability of oxygen. We need all of these elements in order for this process to take place. Feel good so far? Great. We're going to get into it a little bit. I wanted to point this out. This is from some new research that came out, first published in 2016. There are legions of scientists around the world who want to understand this process of photosynthesis. The science is fairly new and emerging. Because it's so obvious that plants and all of that, we take for granted that there's emerging science happening in the field. Of course, we have a vested interest in understanding it really well because it's related to textile production and food production in this context. And so there are people studying it. This kind of work was a research project that I was a part of a couple years ago, and it's just interesting. But the main things to understand is the key words are the photo, meaning the light, and the synthesis, meaning we're making something, and it's the process of turning light energy into chemical energy. Another word that I want you to maybe use and circle it in your notes or just understand it because it's really key is it's matter energy. So once we've created molecules, we're no longer thinking about energy in the same context. We're thinking about chemical reactions. So it's not energy like when I eat glucose, I'm not getting the energy from the chemical bonds. I'm just getting energy that's inherent from the chemical that I can do reactions with. Does this make sense? So when I say matter energy, it's no longer inherent energy. It's not the same kind of form of energy as we talked about before. It's just this thing I can do something with. That's the form of energy. Okay? Great. Let's keep going. The other thing I wanted to show here in a similar way, just to respect that there's a lot going on, is the painfully oversimplified view we kind of lose a little bit. So this is the tricarboxylic acid cycle. You saw this in Science 10, but there are a lot of steps. So as this came to exist on our planet, it took a lot of geologic history for all of these pieces to kind of line up in order to make life. So now as we look at this picture on the left, we have new context to really understand what's going on here. That chapter 1 of our class about all the natural systems that vary across space and time, what's important about that is they've set up the conditions to be suitable for life. It's the right temperature that's suitable for life. It's the right amount of solar energy that makes it suitable for life. It's the right availability of water and the right availability of nutrients from the soil that makes the place suitable for life. It's a unique thing. So here is our picture again, and I need to break down because there are a few reasons that this picture is a little misleading. And the first one has to do with this process related to the inputs. So here on the right, where does carbon dioxide come from? Where does it naturally exist? What sphere? It kind of exists a little bit in the biosphere. It's most abundant in another sphere. Just in the atmosphere, but yeah, there's the troposphere and stratosphere. There's a lot of it. It's the density of the molecule. It's air. At the temperatures on Earth, it's air. All right. So that's number one. What about the water? Where does it exist? What sphere? The hydrosphere. And so what are some of the forms that make it available for plants?
Precipitation.
We get it from rain, and then it goes through the soil.
Groundwater.
Could be groundwater. What else? I'll leave it there because we'll come back to something in a second. The first misconception about this process, to make sure we clear up, is people say, oh, plants get their energy from the sun. Well, that's both true and not true. I could do this entire diagram with just the top part, because the plants need matter energy to run all of their processes as well. Every living being does cell respiration. So the fact that we show it, it doesn't have to go through animals in order to recycle. We could have this entire planet just be plants. Plants can do this process as well. So plants use the sun's energy to synthesize the molecules that they also use for energy. It's the same. Everybody's using the same molecule for energy. There are like 2 exceptions to that rule, but we'll ignore those for now. The second is that plants don't undergo cell respiration. Of course they do. And the third misconception is that plants only expel oxygen. That's not true. If they're undergoing cell respiration, they're also expelling these carbon dioxide as a byproduct. They're also expelling water, and they usually do it in the form of water vapor, so transpiration. They also take in oxygen for cell respiration. So, the inputs, the oxygen goes where? Oh, sorry, the output, sorry. The oxygen goes where? Where do we find it and where does it go? It goes into the atmosphere and then into the biosphere, and then where does it go back out? Where do we find oxygen? It's another diatomic molecule, pretty low density, 1 of 7 found always together. Where do we find it? I'll give you a hint. I need some oxygen. Not in the body. Where's oxygen? Yeah, air. The troposphere, the atmosphere. Good. All right, glucose. Where does it go? Glucose is this matter energy piece that we're going to focus on a lot. Where does it go? The plants have it, and then where does it go? They use some of it, so it goes, it stays within themselves, and they use it. Where else can it go? Sometimes stored. Actually, almost everything you see is stored. It shows you also right here. Here it is. Where does it go?
Primary consumer.
Santi read this textbook. Where does it go? Into consumers, but no one else knows what that word means, so just use the normal language.
And
Other organisms, right? The flow of matter energy. Are you guys still alive? We're like dead today? All right, we're good. Good. We got to be good. We got a couple more big things to go through. All right, so I want to pay attention to this little box here on the side, because the laws of thermodynamics are still alive and well. So the fact that we have whatever level of energy is what we have, but we also know that as transformations in energy take place, the quality of that energy goes down. So as we go from sun radiation energy to matter energy, the total energy is the same, but the quality of energy goes down, and there's losses in heat. And as chemical processes take place, remember this? I got to go back too many. The whole thing that showed all those chain of commands is a ton of chemical reactions taking place. As all of those transformations go by, we have changes in the quality of energy. So this is entropy. Heat is lost all along the process. As cell respiration takes place, entropy occurs. That's a big idea. Okay? Great. Let's keep going here. All right, so the picture on the right is the same picture, I know. It's there, again, just for reference. We're going to focus on the picture on the left, which comes from your textbook, which I kind of like but also hate. The reason why I hate it is because it's not proportional. I don't remember when I learned this fact, but I do know that it changed I just remember contemplating it for many hours like, that is just crazy. The amount of solar energy that strikes the earth and is absorbed by a lot of plants. All of the energy that flows through is just 1% of the energy because 99% of it is lost. So if all the solar radiation coming to the planet, 99% just goes into conduction, convection, climate, and weather, or passes through the earth on its way to other places. 1% of it, so this is the piece that's not proportional. It should be like the tiniest sliver. I get it, you can't see though if you did it like that. But 1% is captured by plants. So the total energy is this term that's in the far right, gross primary productivity. Gross meaning total, primary referring to it's the first, and it's the level of productivity for chemical reactions. So it's these producers, otherwise known as plants. It's the total energy. They use quite a bit of the energy is lost in cell respiration and entropy. So of their energy, the total amount that comes from the sun that they absorb, 60% is gone and 40% of it remains. We call that the net primary productivity. It's the leftover pieces. So of all the energy, when you look out and you see all these plants and they have leaves and they have all that matter, it's a lot of stored energy. That's the net primary productivity. The other 60% is lost to heat and lost to the cell processes that support the life of that plant. Gross primary productivity, the total. Net primary productivity, the leftover. Savvy? Excellent. So here's a couple new pieces of key terminology just to understand here. And we know some of this from 6th grade and grade school and that, but I want to make sure we've got it so we know it in this context. A food chain is like what I showed you on the very first slide. It shows an alligator eating a fish, eating a smaller fish, and then we can assume the smaller fish ate some other little things, and maybe that ate some algae or whatever. That food chain. So it's the sequence of who eats who going along the way. The food web is more complex because the alligator probably also eats a couple of things. And so we can follow, if it ate something else, we'd have a different food chain to follow. And the big fish that it eats doesn't just have one piece of its diet, it eats a bunch of different things. So if we follow one line, we call that a food chain. But when we paint the whole picture of everything going on inside of an ecosystem, it's really complicated. We call that a food web. Each level along the food chain inside of a food web is a trophic level. So the word trophic is the Greek word for food. And we're going to put all organisms on planet Earth into two basic categories. The ones that undergo that specific important phenomenon of changing sun energy into matter energy. And so those are called producers. They're also called autotrophs. So the trophic level that has that Greek word, the root meaning food, is the same here. It's food. Auto means they do it on their own, automatically making food, right? So these are organisms, and we have kind of a terrestrial bias, so I wanted to make sure I mentioned that it's also aquatic plants. So some of the places where we get water in the hydrosphere is lakes, ponds, rivers, etc. So algae, and then there are a few selective bacteria across our planet that also can photosynthesize and produce energy as well. And we mentioned it like, oh, there's a couple selective, but those organisms, those bacteria organisms, support all of the marine ecosystems. Without those phytoplankton that do photosynthesis, you wouldn't have such organisms like the biggest ones on our planet, whales. So we need a lot of that energy. All of the other organisms are called consumers. So this is Santi's definition. These are the ones that get their food from another place. So we have different categories of consumers. We have carnivores, we have scavengers, omnivores, herbivores, all these different things. But we can put all of the organisms into two categories. So here, I want to show a video here, and we're just going to watch it for a couple minutes. I love this video. This is from the BBC, The Hunt. They did a great series of documentaries. But I want you to do a couple things, and you can just list them generally in your head. But what do you see? Make some observations, but also note how many of those types of organisms do you see in this ecosystem. And then if you can just put together a really basic food web, we'll be ready to go. So let me get this started. I got to turn the sound up.
Leopards are the most versatile of all the big cats, adept at finding cover in the most unpromising places. The steep walls of the gully are now her cover for an ambush. The male puku is close enough, but he's too big to tackle. She needs to slip past him without being seen. If he spots her, he'll blow her cover. Slowly does it. To succeed here, she needs to find prey grazing close to the edge, or better still, in the gully itself.
Will was so excited, he was ready for it. I gotta pause it because we've got enough time. We gotta pause it. All right, so what do we see? What do we see? What are some of the organisms? Let's go. What do you see? We got the puku antelope. What else? We got the little cat. Yeah.
The grasses.
We got a bunch of grasses. What else did you see?
Tree.
Oh, we got trees. Yeah, for sure.
Shrublands happening.
We got some shrubbery, a little tiny, little scrub brush for sure. All right, let's look at the populations. What did we generally see? Antelope. How many?
More than the cheetah.
More than the cheetah. What about the grasses?
They also have
A lot of grass.
There was quite a bit of grass. There was a lot of other things.
Only a few trees.
That's exactly right. The lower down, we're going to bring this together. The lower down on the food chain, the more of that organism there is. So we go, what is the food chain if we would just want to do it really quick? We should always start at the primary producers. These ones, the producers, the autotrophs. What do we see? Grass, then what? Then this puku antelope, then the cat, right? Great, so we've got a food chain. You could never have a situation where there would be more of the organism further up the food chain than lower below, because there's not enough energy. All along the way, as transformations in energy take place, as we use that matter energy to power chemical reactions, there are losses due to entropy and heat and those transformations. So here's what we're talking about. The energy efficiency refers to the amount of energy that is available to go. So the first step we've already seen. The sun's energy, 99% of it does nothing for life. everything powered for all living beings comes from that tiny fraction of 1%. And then the plants, the net primary productivity left over is what's available for the next row. So we have layers and ways of titling these levels, we call it trophic levels. So as we go up a food chain, we can assign the trophic levels. At the bottom is primary producers, the ones that make the food. Above those are the first ones that consume, primary consumers. Then secondary consumers, tertiary, quaternary. You really can't go much higher than that. Why couldn't we just go up to 10 levels?
Because there's not enough.
I don't know.
There's not enough energy. We lose it. So we know that there's some basic energy efficiency at play, but almost all ecosystems follow this basic thing called the rule of 10. So we have grasses at the bottom. It's a fabricated example, but it shows you the basic mathematics. So here we go. This is the amount of grass. If there's 10,000 joules of energy that they've captured and they have in their net primary productivity, that's the amount available. Only about 10% of that is available in the zebras. Students often get confused with this, and so I want to make sure it's clear, where they get it reversed. If on our planet we are able to capture 90% of the energy versus 10, our whole planet looks way different. If we could capitalize on that level of energy efficiency, it'd be extraordinary, but it's not like that. Entropy and the thermodynamic laws that govern everything in our universe are strong at play. So we only have about 10% of the energy. And for that level, we have 10% again. So while energy efficiency is a principle, we also see that in general, it usually goes along these lines of essentially 10% is available to everybody.
So on the trophic levels, for the most part, it looks like primary consumers are herbivores, whereas anything above that becomes carnivores. What if you had something that's like an omnivore that eats both producers and, say, primary consumers?
So fish is a good example of an omnivore, and it's dependent on the number. So carnivores are always further towards the top, of course, because of the available energy there, and they're always found in really small populations. Anything that eats producers, you usually don't find omnivores here because the digestion is complex. So there's more on that than is necessary to understand for the class. I don't want to get too far into the weeds. Feel good? Ready to do a little practical work? Me too. Me too. This is a great exercise right here. So the first thing, there's one typo. Sorry. This should say kilogram calories, which just means the total number of calories. Just think about that as calories. And it corresponds with this graph on the side. So my first question is about primary productivity, and it's the number of kilocalories per meter squared per year, which is the same as what you find on this graphic. So here it shows 0 on the value axis up to 3,000 kilocalories per meter squared per year available in this ecosystem, and here are a bunch of different ecosystems. So why do we find these ecosystems? Where would we expect to find these? A little bit of calculation work, and yeah, we got about 5 minutes left in our class. Definitely can work on this together, but let's get into the calculations a little bit. Everybody should practice these. This is how we're going to start our day on Tuesday. Sorry. Let's start this way. That's good, right?